The calendar date is August 14th, 1944. The location is northern France, approximately 22 kilometers west of Argenton, along a secondary east-west road previously cataloged by U.S. Army engineers as Route D-219. The road surface is compacted gravel over clay, averaging 5.2 meters in width, bordered by hedgerows ranging from 1.8 to 2.4 meters in height. Elevation varies gradually, rising from 112 meters above sea level at the western approach to 129 meters near the central ridgeline. At 4:40, before first light, a single U.S. Army supply vehicle departs a temporary logistics park established in a former apple orchard. The vehicle is a GMC CCKW 353, a 2.5-ton, six-wheel drive cargo truck. Curb weight is 4,870 kilograms. With load, ammunition crates, ration boxes, and jerry cans, the gross weight approaches 8,900 kilograms. The truck is powered by a GMC Model 270 inline six-cylinder gasoline engine, producing 104 horsepower at 2,750 revolutions per minute. Top governed speed on level ground is 72 kilometers per hour, though on this route the driver maintains speeds below 35 kilometers per hour. The driver is private first class, age 24, assigned to a quartermaster truck company attached to 3rd Army Support Elements. His training is logistical, not infantry. His assigned personal weapon is an M1 carbine, gas-operated, semi-automatic, weighing 2.36 kilograms unloaded, fitted with iron sights calibrated to 300 yards. The carbine is stowed to the right of the driver's seat, muzzle down, chamber empty. He carries 4 15-round magazines loaded with .30 carbine ball ammunition, muzzle velocity 607 meters per second, optimized for short-range defense rather than penetration. At 4:47, the truck reaches the eastern perimeter of the orchard staging area. The driver halts briefly to adjust tire pressure visually. No gauges are available. Ambient temperature is 14 degrees Celsius. Humidity is high. The sky is overcast with low cloud cover at approximately 600 meters, limiting early daylight. Wind is negligible, less than 3 kilometers per hour from the northwest. At 5:02, the convoy order changes. What was intended to be a 3-vehicle movement becomes a single-vehicle run. 2 other trucks are reassigned to a southern route after a liaison officer reports German activity near the crossroads at Le Mesnil-Langet, roughly 6 kilometers ahead. The driver receives verbal instruction that Route D-219 is already lost, but that the forward infantry elements require the cargo regardless. No escort is available. Air cover is unavailable due to weather and competing priorities. At 5:06, the driver departs alone. For the first 2.4 kilometers, the road passes through open farmland. Visibility is limited to 70 to 90 meters due to hedgerows and gentle bends. The driver maintains second gear, engine speed steady at 1,800 revolutions per minute, listening for irregular engine sounds or distant artillery. None are immediately apparent. The only audible noise is the engine, the suspension responding to ruts, and the shifting of cargo restrained by canvas and rope. At 5:28, the road begins a gradual ascent of 3.1% grade. The driver downshifts to maintain torque. Fuel consumption increases. The truck carries 151 liters of gasoline, sufficient for approximately 240 kilometers under ideal conditions, significantly less under load and low gear operation. At 5:41, first light becomes sufficient to distinguish terrain color and depth. Shadows are minimal due to cloud cover. The driver scans continuously, alternating focus between the road surface, hedgerow gaps, and elevated ground ahead. No friendly markings are visible. No civilian movement is observed. Farmhouses along the route appear abandoned, doors open, windows broken or shuttered. At 5:53, the driver passes a destroyed culvert at kilometer marker D-219-7. A temporary wooden bypass has been constructed by engineers, wide enough for single-vehicle passage. The driver slows to 8 km per hour, aligns carefully, and crosses without stopping. The suspension compresses heavily on exit. No contact is made. At 6:10, distant artillery is heard, low, Irregular reports from the east-southeast. Estimated range 12 to 15 kilometers. No incoming rounds are observed. The driver notes the sound but continues. By 6:24, fatigue becomes apparent. The driver has been awake since 1:30. His posture stiffens. He reduces speed to 28 kilometers per hour to maintain control and awareness. Hands remain fixed at the steering wheel's upper quadrants. The windshield is partially fogged at the edges due to humidity, requiring frequent wiping with a cloth. At 6:37, the road enters a shallow defile. Hedgerows close in to less than 3 meters from the road edge on both sides. Elevation rises to 126 meters. The driver pauses briefly, 22 seconds, to listen. Engine idles at 900 revolutions per minute. No voices, no track vehicle noise, no small arms fires detected. He resumes movement. At 6:58, the driver encounters the first evidence of combat. A burned-out German Opel Blitz truck angled into the ditch on the north side of the road. The vehicle is gutted by fire. No bodies are visible. The driver does not stop. He increases speed slightly to clear the area. At 7:15, he reaches a marked fork. The left branch descends toward a village identified on his map as St. Martin-de-Bois. The right branch continues east along D-219. The driver remains on the assigned route. There is no signage indicating friendly control. From 7:15 to 8:30, progress slows. The road surface degrades. Craters from indirect fire force repeated detours onto the verge. Each deviation risks bogging the truck in soft soil. The driver selects lines carefully, often stopping for 10 to 15 seconds to assess ground firmness before advancing. During this period, there is no direct enemy contact. The threat remains implied rather than visible. The driver's attention remains fixed forward. He does not smoke. He does not eat. Water is consumed in small amounts to avoid the need to stop. At 8:42, the driver halts under a stand of trees to allow engine temperature to drop. Coolant temperature has risen to 92 degrees Celsius, within limits, but trending upward due to sustained low-gear operation. He shuts down for 4 minutes, listening. A single aircraft engine is heard overhead at altitude, direction indeterminate. At 8:46, the engine is restarted. The driver resumes movement. The road ahead curves gently east-northeast. The destination remains 11 kilometers away. The route is still designated as lost. At 8:52, the truck clears the tree stand and re-enters open ground. The hedgerows recede slightly, opening the fields of cut wheat. Stubble height averages 18 to 22 centimeters. The soil between rows is dry on the surface, but soft beneath. Tracks from prior military traffic are visible, overlapping and irregular, indicating mixed vehicle movement over the previous 48 hours. At 9:03, the driver observes fresh tread marks crossing the road at shallow angle from south to north. The pattern suggests tracked vehicles, likely light armored or half-tracked, with track width of approximately 30 centimeters. The impressions are sharp-edged, indicating passage within the last 12 hours. He does not stop. He reduces speed to 24 kilometers per hour. The weather remains overcast. Light levels are stable. Visibility extends to 120 meters in open stretches, collapsing to 40 to 50 meters where hedgerows narrow. Wind remains negligible. Sound carries poorly. At 9:11, the driver hears distant small arms fire. The sound is intermittent, irregular, and directionally ambiguous due to terrain. Estimated distance is 2 to 3 kilometers to the northeast. No rounds impact nearby. The driver keeps the engine running steadily, avoiding acceleration that would draw attention. At 9:19, he passes a shallow drainage ditch on the south side of the road. The ditch contains standing water approximately 20 centimeters deep. Reeds and grasses obscure the lower bank. The driver notes the feature as potential concealment for infantry, but does not observe movement. At 9:27, the road rises again, gradient 4.2%, toward a low crest at 131 meters elevation. The driver downshifts. Engine noise increases. The sound is likely audible at greater distance. He compensates by maintaining a constant throttle to avoid sharp changes in pitch. At 9:34, Upon cresting the rise, the driver sees a cluster of buildings approximately 900 meters ahead, partially concealed by trees. According to the map, this is an unnamed hamlet consisting of 4 farm structures and a stone outbuilding. Smoke residue stains one roof. No active smoke is present. The driver considers stopping to observe. He does not. He continues at 22 kilometers per hour, eyes alternating between the road, the buildings, and the flanking hedgerows. At 9:41, a single rifle shot cracks to the south, approximately 150 meters away. The round impacts the road surface behind the truck, producing a small dust plume. The driver does not look back. He increases speed to 32 kilometers per hour and maintains course. No further shots follow immediately. At 9:44, the driver passes a hamlet. Buildings are unoccupied. Doors hang open. A German field ration tin lies crushed near a doorway. No bodies are visible. No vehicles are present. The driver clears the area in under 2 minutes. From 9:46 to 10:15, the road descends gradually into a shallow valley. The descent reduces engine strain. The driver allows speed to increase slightly to 36 kilometers per hour, still below maximum for the terrain. He listens for pursuit. None is detected. At 10:18, the driver encounters a roadblock. 2 felled trees placed across the road at an angle. The trunks measure approximately 35 centimeters in diameter. The obstruction leaves a narrow gap of 1.9 meters on the north side, barely sufficient for the truck's 2.46 meter width, including mirrors. The ground beyond the gap slopes toward a ditch. The driver stops at 10:19. He shuts off the engine. Silence follows. He waits 1 minute, scanning left and right. No movement is observed. No voices are heard. At 10:21, he restarts the engine and attempts the gap. He removes a side mirror on the north side to reduce width. The truck advances at 3 kilometers per hour. The right rear wheel slips briefly on loose soil, but regains traction. The truck clears the obstacle without contact. At 10:26, the driver replaces the mirror and continues. At 10:33, the valley floor narrows. Hedgerows close again. The road curves sharply to the east. Visibility drops to 30 meters. The driver reduces speed to 18 kilometers per hour. At 10:37, 2 more rifle shots are fired, this time from the north side, estimated distance 100 meters. 1 round strikes the wooden sideboard of the cargo bed, penetrating but not igniting contents. The impact produces a sharp crack and splintering. The driver accelerates hard. Engine RPM spikes to 2,600. The truck surges forward. At 10:38, a 3rd shot misses high, passing above the cab. No automatic fire follows. The driver does not return fire. He focuses on clearing the kill zone. By 10:41, the road straightens. The driver slows slightly to avoid engine overheat. He checks mirrors. No pursuit is visible. At 10:49, he reaches a small stone bridge spanning a stream 2.3 meters wide. The bridge has low parapets, 0.6 meters high. The stream is shallow, slow-moving. The driver crosses without stopping. At 10:56, the driver hears the distinctive clatter of a German MG-42 being test-fired at distance. The sound is brief, approximately 3 seconds, from the east. The cyclic rate is unmistakable. Estimated distance is 1.5 kilometers. The driver reduces speed and prepares mentally for further contact. From 11 to 12 o'clock, progress becomes cautious and segmented. The driver advances in short intervals, often stopping for 20 to 40 seconds to listen. He keeps the engine idling during stops to avoid restart delays. Fuel consumption increases. At 11:18, he observes smoke rising from beyond a ridgeline to the southeast. The smoke is dark, consistent with vehicle fires. Artillery detonations are faint but present. At 11:32, a German infantry patrol crosses the road ahead at approximately 300 meters, moving south to north. The driver stops immediately and shuts down the engine. He waits. The patrol consists of 4 men, carrying rifles and 1 light machine gun. They do not look toward the truck's position, likely due to hedgerow concealment and engine silence. After 2 minutes, they disappear into the fields. At 11:36, the driver restarts and advances slowly. At 11:58, fatigue intensifies. The driver's reaction time slow. He forces himself to maintain scanning discipline. Road, left hedge, right hedge, horizon, instruments repeat. At 12:10, distant artillery impacts closer, approximately 800 meters away. The ground vibrates slightly. No shrapnel reaches the road. At 12:22, the driver passes a signpost bearing German markings, hastily painted, indicating a rearward route. This confirms enemy presence and control of the area within the last 24 hours. At 12:30, the sun briefly breaks through cloud cover. Light levels increase. Shadows sharpen. Visibility improves marginally. At 12:41, the driver halts again to cool the engine. Coolant temperature reads 96 degrees Celsius, approaching operational limits. He shuts down for 6 minutes, longer than before. He drinks water. He does not eat. He listens. No movement is detected. At 12:47, he restarts. The destination is now 6.8 kilometers away. The road ahead slopes upward again toward contested ground. The pressure is no longer abstract. Enemy contact is confirmed. The driver continues because stopping offers no safer alternative. At 12:49, the truck moves forward in low gear. The road narrows further, bordered by earth embankments reinforced with stone in places, remnants of pre-war drainage work. The effective width is reduced to 4.6 meters. Any attempt to turn around will require reversing for several hundred meters, an impractical maneuver under threat. At 12:56, the driver notes a change in terrain texture. The gravel layer thins, exposing compacted clay. Tire grip decreases slightly. He reduces speed to 20 kilometers per hour to avoid lateral slip near the embankments. At 13:03, a single round strikes the front grille from the east-northeast, estimated range 200 meters. The bullet penetrates the radiator housing, but does not immediately rupture the core. Steam does not appear. The driver registers the impact through sound and vibration rather than sight. He maintains course. At 13:04, 2 more shots follow in quick succession. One impacts the windshield on the passenger side, cracking the glass but not penetrating fully. Laminated safety glass holds. Visibility on that side degrades slightly due to spiderweb cracking. The driver leans marginally left to compensate. At 13:05, the driver accelerates to 38 kilometers per hour, the maximum achievable on the grade. The engine labors. Coolant temperature rises rapidly. He accepts the risk. At 13:06, a burst of automatic fire erupts from the north side hedgerow. The sound profile is consistent with an MP40 or possibly a captured submachine gun. Rounds strike the cargo bed canvas and wooden slats. No secondary explosions occur. Ammunition crates remain intact. The driver does not return fire. His carbine remains stowed. Engaging would require stopping or slowing significantly. He prioritizes forward momentum. At 13:07, the road bends sharply south. The hedgerow on the inside of the curve is dense and high, approximately 2.5 meters. Visibility drops to 15 meters. The driver holds speed, steering carefully to avoid clipping the embankment. At 13:08, the truck clears the curve. Fire ceases abruptly. No pursuit follows immediately. The driver reduces speed to 30 kilometers per hour to regain control and assess vehicle condition. At 13:11, steam begins to vent lightly from the radiator cap. The driver notes the temperature gauge reading 102 degrees Celsius. He decides not to stop yet, estimating another 10 to 15 minutes of safe operation if load and throttle are moderated. At 13:14, he passes a destroyed American M4 Sherman tank off the south side of the road, approximately 40 meters from the verge. The turret is rotated east. Penetration marks on the glacis indicate armor-piercing hits. No crew remains are visible. The presence confirms recent heavy fighting. At 13:18, the driver hears footsteps in the hedgerow to the north, synchronized and cautious. He does not see the movement clearly. He increases speed slightly without provoking engine knock. At 13:20, a single rifle shot strikes the rear left tire. Air pressure drops rapidly. The truck begins to pull left. The driver counters steering input and maintains speed. The tire continues to rotate despite deflation, the sidewall flexing visibly. At 1321, the driver considers stopping to change the tire. He rejects the option. The process would take at least 8 minutes under ideal conditions and would expose him fully. At 1322, the road descends again, easing engine load. The driver allows gravity to maintain speed while reducing throttle. At 1326, he crosses another small bridge, this one wooden, reinforced with steel rails. The structure creaks under the truck's weight, but holds. At 1329, the driver experiences auditory narrowing. Peripheral sounds diminish. He consciously forces himself to scan instruments and surroundings to counter fatigue-induced tunnel vision. At 1334, the road opens briefly into a clearing approximately 300 meters wide. The clearing is surrounded by tree lines on 3 sides. On the far edge, 5 German infantrymen are visible, moving left to right. One carries a light machine gun, likely an MG-34, identifiable by barrel profile and slower cyclic rate when test-fired briefly into the air. At 1335, the machine gun fires a short burst toward the truck. Rounds strike the ground ahead, kicking up dust. Range is approximately 220 meters. The driver maintains speed and trajectory, presenting a moving target. At 1336, one round penetrates the cab door on the driver's side, entering at a shallow angle. The bullet passes behind the seat back and exits through the rear panel. The driver is not hit. He remains unaware of the penetration until later inspection. At 1337, the truck clears a clearing. Fire ceases. The driver does not slow. From 1340 to 1410, there is no direct contact. The driver's stress level remains elevated. His hands cramp slightly on the steering wheel. He shifts grip periodically to maintain circulation. At 1412, he encounters a crater partially blocking the road. Diameter 3.2 meters, depth 1.1 meters. He steers around it on the north side, wheels briefly leaving prepared surface. The deflated rear tire scrapes the rim, but holds. At 1418, the engine temperature spikes again. Steam becomes more pronounced. The driver decides to stop at the next concealed location, regardless of risk. At 1423, he pulls under a dense tree canopy, shuts down the engine, and exits the cab. He moves quickly but deliberately. He checks the radiator. A small leak is visible near the upper housing, likely from the earlier impact. He pours water from his canteen into the radiator to compensate for loss, knowing it will boil quickly. At 1427, distant voices are heard, German from the east. The driver re-enters the cab and restarts immediately. He does not complete repairs. He pulls back onto the road. At 1430, the truck resumes movement. Engine compromised but functional. Distance to destination is now 4.2 kilometers. The engagement phase has shifted from sporadic contact to deliberate interdiction. The driver continues because remaining stationary will result in detection. At 1431, the truck accelerates gradually, limited by the damaged cooling system and the partially deflated rear tire. Speed stabilizes at 26 kilometers per hour. The driver maintains this pace to balance movement with mechanical survival. Engine noise is uneven now, a slight metallic rasp audible during throttle changes, suggesting heat stress in the block. The road trends east-southeast. Elevation increases again, climbing toward 138 meters over the next 1.6 kilometers. The grade averages 3.8%. The driver downshifts early to prevent overheating. The engine temperature gauge fluctuates between 99 and 104 degrees Celsius. At 1438, German activity becomes systematic. A single rifle shot is fired from long range, not aimed to hit, but to test reaction. The driver does not alter speed. 30 seconds later, a second shot follows from a different direction, indicating coordination. The enemy is no longer reacting. They are probing. At 1441, the driver observes tripwire strung low across a hedgerow gap on the south side of the road, approximately 40 centimeters above ground. It is attached to a stick grenade without the fragmentation sleeve, likely intended for dismounted troops rather than vehicles. The placement suggests a hurried defensive measure. The truck passes without triggering it. At 14:45, the driver hears a distinct sound of mortar round launching, an abrupt hollow thump from the northeast. He counts silently. At 14:47, the round impacts approximately 120 meters behind him, detonating in the road. Shrapnel rattles against the cargo bed. No penetration occurs. At 14:48, a second mortar round impacts closer, approximately 60 meters to the rear. The driver increases speed marginally, accepting further strain on the engine. He remains seated upright, shoulders rigid, eyes forward. At 14:50, the mortar fire ceases. The driver infers that the enemy lacks precise observation or is conserving ammunition. He does not slow. At 14:54, the road enters a wooded section. Trees are mature, trunks 30 to 50 centimeters in diameter. Canopy dense enough to reduce light levels noticeably. Visibility drops to 20 to 25 meters. The air is cooler under the canopy, marginally reducing engine temperature. At 14:57, automatic fire erupts from both sides simultaneously. Two weapons are identified by sound. One MG-42 firing a short burst, and one MP-40 firing longer, controlled bursts. The fire is aimed at the cab and engine compartment. At 14:58, multiple rounds strike the hood and fenders. One penetrates the hood and likely damages ancillary components, but does not stop the engine. The driver maintains speed. He does not duck or weave. Sudden steering inputs on the narrow road would risk collision with trees. At 14:59, a round strikes the left front tire. The tire deflates rapidly. The truck now rides unevenly, with increased vibration transmitted to the steering column. Control becomes more difficult, but forward motion continues. At 15:01, the truck clears the wooded section. Fire ceases abruptly. The enemy does not pursue with vehicles, likely due to fuel shortages or risk of air attack despite overcast conditions. At 15:04, the driver assesses the situation. Two tires are compromised. The cooling system is leaking. Ammunition and rations remain intact. He estimates remaining drivable distance at 3 kilometers, possibly less if the radiator fails completely. At 15:07, he encounters a shallow road cut through a low ridge. The cut is 4 meters deep with exposed soil banks. This creates a channelized environment. The driver reduces speed slightly, scanning the banks for movement. At 15:09, a single German soldier appears briefly at the top of the north bank, silhouetted against the sky. The soldier raises a rifle, but does not fire. The truck passes beneath before an effective shot can be taken. At 15:12, the driver exits the road cut. The terrain opens into rolling farmland again. In the distance, faint friendly artillery markers, colored smoke remnants, are visible near the horizon, indicating proximity to American lines. At 15:15, the engine temperature spikes sharply to 108 degrees Celsius. Steam vents continuously now. The driver reduces throttle, coasting where possible. He knows that stopping will result in engine seizure or capture. At 15:18, another mortar round impacts ahead of the truck, approximately 80 meters forward. The explosion throws debris across the road. The driver brakes briefly, then steers through the debris field. Shrapnel strikes the undercarriage. No immediate mechanical failure occurs. At 15:21, German small arms fire resumes, but less coordinated. Individual rifle shots are fired from long range. Accuracy decreases. The enemy appears to be losing effective control of the area, possibly withdrawing or repositioning. At 15:25, the driver hears American artillery fire overhead, outgoing direction west to east. The sound is unmistakable. This indicates that he has crossed into an area covered by friendly guns. At 15:28, a final burst of automatic fire strikes the cargo bed from behind. Rounds tear through canvas and wood, but do not detonate ammunition. The fire stops quickly. At 15:30, the driver passes a hastily erected American road marker, white painted wood, indicating a supply route. The marker is damaged but legible. He does not slow. The escalation phase concludes not with single decisive action, but with a gradual shift in pressure. Enemy fire becomes less frequent, less precise. The driver continues forward, vehicle degraded but functional, awareness fixed on reaching the line. At 15:31, the truck continues eastward at 18 kilometers per hour. Speed is dictated not by caution, but by mechanical limitation. The front axle vibrates due to the blown tire. Steering response is delayed. The driver compensates with small, continuous corrections, keeping the vehicle centered on the road. The landscape changes subtly. Hedgerows become less dense. Fields are larger, less segmented. This reflects proximity to recently advanced American formations that have cleared paths for armor and logistics. The road surface improves slightly, transitioning back to compacted gravel. At 15:34, the driver observes fresh American vehicle tracks overlapping German ones. The overlap indicates rapid territorial exchange within the last 6 to 12 hours. No friendly personnel are immediately visible. At 15:37, a single German rifle shot is fired from extreme range, estimated 400 meters. The round falls short. No follow-up shots occur. The driver does not react beyond maintaining course. At 15:40, the engine begins to misfire intermittently. The sound is irregular, likely caused by overheating affecting fuel vaporization or ignition timing. The driver adjusts throttle gently to smooth operation. At 15:43, the road dips into a shallow depression where rainwater has collected. Steam from the engine condenses briefly in the cooler air. Visibility is reduced momentarily as vapor drifts across the windshield. The driver wipes the glass with his sleeve through the open side window. At 15:46, the driver sees an American infantry outpost ahead at approximately 600 meters. Identification is made by helmet shape, uniform color, and the presence of an M1919A4 light machine gun set up on a tripod facing east. A single infantryman raises an arm, signaling the truck to slow. At 15:48, the driver reduces speed to 10 kilometers per hour. He does not stop until directed. The truck rolls forward, engine knocking faintly. At 15:49, the infantryman signals a halt. The driver stops. He shuts down the engine immediately to prevent catastrophic failure. Steam pours from the radiator. At 15:50, two American soldiers approach cautiously, weapons lower but ready. They inspect the truck's exterior. Bullet holes are counted quickly. No unexploded ordnance is detected in the cargo bed. At 15:52, the driver exits the cab. His legs are stiff. He remains standing, steadying himself against the door. He does not speak immediately. His face shows fatigue but no outward distress. At 15:54, the soldiers identify the cargo and wave forward another infantryman, who runs to inform platoon leader. The cargo is deemed critical. Arrangements are made to unload on site rather than risk further movement. At 15:58, the driver sits on the ground near the truck's rear wheel. He removes his helmet briefly to wipe sweat and condensation from the liner. His hands tremble slightly due to adrenaline release and fatigue. At 16:02, distant German artillery impacts are heard farther east, beyond the American line. The immediate threat has passed. The driver remains alert, but no longer expects contact. At 16:10, unloading begins. Ammunition crates are moved first. The driver assists minimally, following instructions. His physical strength is reduced. He focuses on balance and coordination. At 16:18, a medic approaches and conducts a brief assessment. No wounds are found. Minor abrasion from glass fragments are cleaned. At 16:25, the truck is examined by a motor sergeant. The radiator leak, tire damage, and body penetrations are noted. The vehicle is declared non-operational for forward movement without recovery support. At 16:30, the decisive period ends not with combat, but with arrival. The mission objective, delivery of supplies, is partially fulfilled. The vehicle is immobilized but intact enough to have completed its function. At 16:45, the driver is escorted to a temporary command post established in a farmhouse cellar. He is given water and a ration bar. He eats slowly. His appetite is limited. At 17:10, a brief debriefing occurs. The driver recounts a route taken. points of contact, observed enemy positions, and obstacles. Times and locations are marked on a map. His information is recorded without embellishment. At 17:35, the driver rests on a bench. He does not sleep. He remains aware of surrounding sounds, adjusting slowly to reduce threat. At 18:20, recovery crews arrive to assess the truck. It will be towed after nightfall. The cargo already unloaded is redistributed forward. At 1900 hours, the driver is reassigned temporarily to perimeter duties, assisting with basic tasks. He carries his carbine again, though he did not fire it during the journey. At 21:30, darkness falls fully. The area remains active but stable. No further German probing occurs in this sector. In the days following, the route taken by the driver is formally designated unsafe for single-vehicle movement. Subsequent supply runs use alternate corridors supported by armor and infantry escorts. The information provided by the driver contributes to that decision. The event does not alter the broader course of the campaign. It does not result in commendation or punishment. It demonstrates the operational reality of logistics under contested conditions, movement through uncertainty, exposure without engagement, and the completion of a task despite the loss of control over the route. What is proven is limited and specific. A single vehicle without escort can traverse a contested area if timing, terrain, and restraint align. What is changed is procedural, not symbolic. Routes are reclassified. Risk calculations are adjusted. The driver returns to routine duties. No record notes the journey as exceptional. It is one of many similar movements that sustain the advance, recorded only in fragments, defined by hours rather than outcomes.